To break through a 12-kilometer defensive line, Russian forces launched wave after wave of mechanized human wave assaults. And this wasn't a short push, it went on for 2.5 years. Endless armor and infantry were thrown into this kill zone, only to be chewed up, layer by layer, by the Ukrainian defenses like a meat grinder. In this video, we're breaking down one of the most intense and prolonged defensive battles of the war. If you find this kind of footage valuable, hit like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for the support. We go back to late 2024. The fighting is centered on Verkhnokamiansk, on the border between Donetsk and Luhansk. Russian forces are using the village as a launch point, pushing hard west to take Siversk. If Siversk falls, Ukraine's entire northern Donbass defense gets crushed. To stop them, the K2 battalion of the 54th Mechanized Brigade is ordered to hold the ground between the two towns. One battalion, 12 kilometers of front, a sector that would normally need a full brigade. With superior numbers and armor, the Russians launch repeated mechanized human wave assaults, trying to smash through in one go. And this is where one of the longest and bloodiest defensive battles of the war begins, a 2.5-year meat grinder on the road to Siversk. A Russian mechanized column comes into view of a reconnaissance drone. The APCs are packed with infantry and charging full speed toward Ukrainian positions. Using the real-time feed from the drone, Ukrainian forces immediately call in long-range artillery. Shell after shell starts slamming into the area around the advancing column. Explosions erupt one after another. Thick black smoke billows into the sky as dirt and debris are thrown in every direction. At the same time, Ukrainian scouts hidden in the tree line on the left open fire on the vehicles. Even as rounds hammer into the armor, the Russian drivers refuse to slow down. The vehicles keep pushing forward at full speed toward the Ukrainian lines. Halfway there, the Russian column leaves the road and drives straight toward the Ukrainian positions. This open ground is already well within Ukrainian fire range. The intensity of the attack ramps up immediately. On top of that, the Ukrainians have seeded this open field with anti-tank mines, waiting for the Russians to drive right into the trap. It doesn't take long. Just a few dozen meters off the road, massive explosions erupt. The lead vehicles hit the mines in rapid succession. Fire and thick smoke instantly engulf the tanks. The blast waves tear through the undercarriages, leaving the vehicles completely destroyed on the spot. Even with the lead vehicles knocked out, the Russians don't stop. The remaining vehicles swing around the wrecks and keep charging full speed toward the Ukrainian positions. You can clearly see this is a determined unit, highly motivated and willing to push through heavy losses. But can sheer aggression alone break through a well-prepared Ukrainian defense and complete the mission? Let's keep watching. Fueled by that same aggressive momentum, the surviving vehicles push all the way up to the Ukrainian trenches. Infantry starts dismounting and moves into assault on foot. On the Ukrainian side, the FPV drones aren't delivering the saturation effect that might have been expected. The Russian column doesn't face a dense swarm of drone strikes and manages to push all the way up to the Ukrainian positions. Through the drone feed, the Russian tactics become very clear. Once the vehicles reach the trenches, the APCs quickly dismount their infantry while the tanks provide covering fire. But the tank fire support is dangerously close. The gun barrels are almost pointed toward their own dismounting infantry. When the tanks open fire, the rounds fly straight toward the area where their own troops are landing, a moment that makes you hold your breath. On top of that, the vehicles are packed far too tightly. Ukrainian soldiers take up good firing positions and keep launching RPG rockets at the Russian column. But the engagement range is too long, most of the rockets miss their targets. After dismounting their infantry, the remaining Russian vehicles waste no time and pull back toward their rear positions. By the end of this assault wave, only 3 vehicles are still mobile, and the bad luck continues. On the way back, another armored vehicle hits an anti-tank mine and is instantly turned into a pile of scrap metal. Meanwhile, the Russian infantry that made it into the trenches is under enormous pressure. Without air or artillery support, they push forward on foot, trying to seize a bunker and establish a forward foothold while waiting for reinforcements. But the task proves far harder than expected. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones lock onto their positions and seal off both their advance and retreat routes. Then a Vampire heavy drone arrives overhead and begins dropping heavy grenades one after another, systematically working over the assault group. Under this kind of drone pressure, the infantry has almost no way to fight back. The situation on the ground quickly becomes completely one-sided. Trapped in a hopeless position, the Russian soldiers no longer have the luxury of dealing with the Ukrainian ground forces closing in from both sides. All their attention is fixed on the deadly threat raining down from above, but every attempt to fight back is useless. Round after round keeps dropping, and more soldiers fall. They never get the reinforcements they were waiting for. Even after the first assault ends in complete failure, the Russian command refuses to call off the attack. They continue sending more mechanized units to force a breakthrough. Under the drone's view, a second assault column appears. This time it's 4 armored vehicles, fully loaded and moving forward. Their fate turns out almost identical to the previous group. The moment they enter the engagement zone, they come under repeated fire from Ukrainian long-range artillery and RPG rockets. Wave after wave of firepower rains down, pinning the entire column in place. It's hard not to notice, these high-cost mechanized charges barely look like coordinated military operations. They look more like the Russians are deliberately delivering targets, giving Ukrainian forces a continuous supply of live-fire training. The rear vehicle is the first to be precisely destroyed, yet the vehicles ahead don't stop to help. They don't slow down at all, they just keep charging full speed toward the Ukrainian positions under heavy fire. This time they try to learn from the previous failure. They avoid the earlier dismount point and stop farther out to unload their infantry. At the same time, the few remaining Russian soldiers still in the trenches begin pulling back, trying to link up with the newly arrived friendly forces. But nothing changes. The Ukrainians had already set the trap and were simply waiting for the Russians to drive straight into it. Fist-sized grenades keep slamming into the tightly packed Russian troops. Because the dismounted soldiers are bunched up so closely, every explosion sends fragments sweeping across a wide area, causing heavy casualties almost instantly. In this desperate situation, a few remaining Russian soldiers form an improvised assault team and throw themselves at a Ukrainian bunker. They advance with rifles and grenades, trying to force a breakthrough, but the ad hoc group is poorly coordinated. Combined with fire from Ukrainian soldiers outside the bunker, their attack quickly falls apart. The momentum collapses, and they're forced to turn around and pull back in a hurry. The Ukrainians, however, have already covered every possible escape route. Several drones are waiting above the withdrawal path. The moment the Russians step into the open, precise munitions start dropping one after another, picking them off. The improvised assault team is completely wiped out. As you can see, the second any movement pops up inside the trenches, the drone strikes never let up. On the other side of the trench line, more than a dozen Russian soldiers who'd barely survived the initial assault still couldn't escape the deadly onslaught. Ukrainian ground troops completely sealed off both ends of the trenches, leaving zero room to retreat. Meanwhile, drones circled high above, locking onto every single movement on the ground and dropping grenades nonstop at every opportunity. Trapped in this brutal double envelopment, pounded from the air and pinned down on the ground, the Russian troops inside the trenches were completely overwhelmed, with no way to fight back at all. They were forced into a desperate, chaotic two-front defense, constantly scanning the skies to evade incoming drone grenades, while scrambling back and forth through the muddy trenches, desperately holding off Ukrainian infantry closing in from both sides. From the bird's-eye drone view, their panicked, disorganized plight is crystal clear. In their final moments, beyond the pure terror of staring down certain death, these soldiers were undoubtedly filled with deep regret, bitterly realizing they'd marched straight into a merciless killing field with no way out. The relentless punishment just keeps going. Ukrainian forces aren't rushing in with assault teams to finish the fight early. Instead, they're using flawless drone and ground troop coordination to methodically shrink the Russians' already tiny survival zone, slowly bleeding out the trapped infantry. Casualties keep stacking up, and the Russians have absolutely no viable counterplay against the drones hovering directly overhead. Their already cramped trench perimeter continues to shrink, leaving them with less and less room to survive. Honestly, you have to question the Russian command's strategy here. They threw their troops straight into a pre-planned Ukrainian ambush with zero fire support, zero tactical backup, and zero contingency plans. It's nothing but a straight-up suicide assault, and it left these frontline soldiers trapped in a hopeless, no-win situation from the very start. Both of Russia's mechanized assault waves ended in devastating defeat. These repeated offensive attempts cost them massive armor losses and countless troop casualties. This level of battlefield performance simply does not live up to its reputation as the world's second most powerful military. In the face of modern integrated combined arms warfare, sheer bravery and willpower alone are no longer enough to secure victory. After suffering wave after wave of brutal setbacks, will the Russian military finally adjust its tactics and change its approach? Stick around, because the fight is far from over. Despite suffering continuous blows and total collapses on the front line, Russian forces refused to back down. Instead, they launched yet another round of reckless assaults, turning the whole battle into a complete spectacle of disorganized warfare. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones kept constant eyes on Russian rear positions, and before long, another enemy armored convoy appeared on camera. Right from the start, this unit showed severe tactical breakdown and internal disunity. The lead MTLB vehicle floored the gas and charged straight toward Ukrainian lines through incoming fire, completely ignoring whether the rest of the column was following. Meanwhile, the armored vehicles behind took fire immediately after leaving their base. They froze in place, showed zero willingness to advance, and were clearly preparing to pull back. Faced with this fragmented and chaotic Russian advance, Ukrainian troops held their fire and played the waiting game. Just as the isolated APC was closing in on the defensive lines, one of the stalled Russian vehicles suddenly accelerated in a last-minute attempt to join the attack. But its every move was already locked down by Ukrainian FPV drones. The drones tailed it closely, holding steady for the perfect shot before striking repeatedly from the rear. Consistent high-speed impacts destroyed the vehicle's entire mobility system, leaving the crippled APC stranded motionless on the roadside. The second the vehicle went down, the surviving Russian infantry scrambled frantically out of the wreckage. Abandoning all formation and discipline, they fled backward in a panicked, disorganized mob, running for their lives. Meanwhile, that lone Russian lead vehicle that charged deep into enemy territory was now pinned down by precise Ukrainian fire. A handful of onboard infantry rushed out in a panic, trying to use the roadside tree lines as cover to storm Ukrainian positions. But the Ukrainian troops held the high ground and were fully prepared for the attack. They unleashed relentless top-down fire, paired with overhead drone support, creating a brutal 360-degree suppression zone. Caught in this fully layered ambush, the Russian infantry were completely helpless. They had no way to fight back and couldn't advance an inch. It's genuinely shocking how irresponsible Russian command's tactics were, sending troops in with no coordinated plan, essentially throwing their own soldiers' lives away for no tactical gain. With drones continuing their relentless pursuit, the broken Russian troops lost all sense of formation and fled in pure chaos. But the second they abandoned their disabled APC, they ran straight into a wall of incoming gunfire. Bullets saturated the entire retreat zone, sealing off every escape route. Multiple soldiers were cut down right on the spot, unable to make it back to friendly lines. This fight was far from over. Before the smoke even cleared, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones spotted a third Russian MTLB rolling in for another futile assault. Wave after wave of these uncoordinated, manpower-heavy charges meant absolutely nothing against Ukraine's well-established, fully integrated air and ground combat system. At this point, the entire battle basically turned into a stress-free live-fire exercise for Ukrainian forces, with Russian armor and troops serving as nothing more than sitting ducks. The overhead drone footage lays out the brutal reality perfectly. Russian armored vehicles travel long distances just to charge straight uphill toward Ukraine's dominant high ground positions. Not only do Ukrainian troops hold the terrain advantage, they also have thick tree lines directly in front of their main lines as a natural defensive barrier. With every possible advantage stacked against them, a successful Russian ground breakthrough is practically impossible. The driver knew a head-on charge was straight-up suicide. He refused to stop in front of Ukraine's main defensive line, quickly rerouting his MTLB to circle around the trench flank and drop off infantry out of the enemy's direct line of sight. Yet one fatal problem remained unavoidable. The path to the flank trenches forced him across wide, completely exposed open terrain, sitting dead center inside Ukraine's primary fire envelope, basically walking straight into a kill zone and turning himself into an easy live target. RPG volleys and relentless FPV drone attacks flooded in nonstop, hammering the vehicle from every angle. Even fitted with professional anti-drone mesh, the armored carrier stood no chance against this all-dimensional firepower. Constant impacts tore apart its hull, leaving the vehicle heavily mangled in moments from total breakdown. Beneath this unrelenting, high-volume barrage, the APC's rear ramp was completely blown open. Nearly every Russian infantryman inside was either killed or wounded, leaving the unit entirely combat ineffective. Even so, the determined driver refused to abort the mission. Pushing through overwhelming enemy fire, he maneuvered the crippled vehicle all the way to the far end of the trench. The second he came to a halt, another wave of drone strikes immediately locked on and hit home, turning the already brutal battlefield into absolute carnage. After taking countless precise drone hits, this battle-worn armored vehicle finally sputtered out and died. With nowhere left to run, the trapped driver abandoned his wrecked ride and jumped straight down into a Ukrainian trench. Even after fighting tooth and nail to survive, he ultimately ended up captured. Looking back at this entire battle, Russia's strategy was painfully one-dimensional. They kept throwing wave after wave of mechanized human wave assaults just to force a breakthrough, with zero effective countermeasures against enemy drones. Up against Ukraine's polished air-ground integrated combat system, these mindless charges did nothing but sacrifice tons of armor and countless troops over and over again. They never managed to break a single line of defense. If anything, these constant suicidal attacks only sharpened Ukraine's battlefield experience and tactical proficiency, essentially training their own enemy for free. That's all for today's battlefield breakdown. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share it around, and make sure to subscribe for more frontline combat analysis. Thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel.